Okay. Right, good evening, everybody. We're here tonight for the Audit and Governance Committee. First of all, I'd like to welcome everybody on the webinar, on the webcast. And firstly, we have apologies from Councillor Whitcroft, Councillor Fisher and Mason, Joe Lee, the independent member, and Councillor Hollier. And we have Councillor Kelly, who is subbing for Councillor Whitcroft tonight, who's in attendance. So, are there any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest, thank you. There's no public participation registered tonight, I don't think. None, no, okay. So, we're moving to the main point of this evening's meeting, which is, let me get to the page, there we are, to agree the proposed addition of wording into Article 11 of the Constitution that's proposed changes to the composition and quorum of staffing matters and urgency committee. And I'll pass that over to the Director of Governance, Bryn Roberts, go ahead on this.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, thank you, members. You'll have read the papers. You'll see from that we have a particular issue at the moment that has been exposed by a need to move a scheduled staffing matters and urgency committee, which was originally listed for the 4th of March. That date became unusable for the purposes for which it was needed. And the Democratic team have been seeking to try and find an alternative date since I believe it's late February. So far they've been unsuccessful in doing so. They are somewhat hamstrung in their efforts by the fact that the Staffing Matters and Urgency Committee is composed of 4 members, and unfortunately, because of an error in the Constitution that I suspect wasn't picked up when it was drafted, the quorum for that committee is 4 people. So without everybody turning up, the meeting can never be ordered and therefore continued. This is obviously not the point of a quorum. And equally, I have a personal aversion to odd, even numbered committees anyway, because I don't think they make sense in the context of decision making. You should always look to start with an odd numbered committee and take it from there. With that in mind, and I think particularly given that this is the urgency committee of the council, and so far we've been unable in a period of sort of 3.5 weeks to find a suitable date. Staffing Matters and Urgency has the power to act in the stead of full council. It can take any decision that full council can. And therefore, the point of having it as an urgency committee is to be able to arrange it at short notice to take an urgent decision. And that's proving somewhat challenging at the moment. The suggestion, therefore, is that we amend the committee membership to take it from 4 members to 5, and that we amend the quorum to take it from 4 members to 3. That's still quite a reasonable proportion. But what it does mean is that you have a much greater opportunity to get other people involved and to actually run the business as it needs to be run. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I think that probably lays the point fairly clearly.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're open to questions now. Okay, Mr. Binney.
Thank you, Britta. I thought it was a really clear report. I think it's common sense. Recognises good practice to have odd numbers, recognises good practice to not have 100% quorum for all the issues. I'm assuming that any kind of operational issues about making decisions are a matter for the Staffing Matters and Urgency Committee rather than us. If there are any kind of operational issues, that's more their business than ours. I guess just a couple of questions from me, if I may, is just one assurance that this is the only committee that has this particular quirk, or is there an opportunity to revise it across the board? And just second, may not be appropriate to build into a committee, but sometimes in constitutions you have, you must have the chair or vice chair there. Or if you have 3 independent members, such as myself, of course, we don't have decision-making powers. So if you had 3 out of 5 and they're all independent, forgive me, I don't actually know who's on this particular committee, then I would expect perhaps it doesn't hit quorum because they're decision-making powers. But besides that, I think it's really sensible.
Yeah. So, I mean, to take the second point first, Staffing Matters and Urgency is solely comprised of elected members. So there's never an issue about that. Equally, there is no restriction on SMU for the chair and vice chair having to be there. It's just a question of the membership. In terms of, are there any other committees that are impacted by this? Quite possibly. We certainly have a couple of other committees that have even numbers. And I think that will be one of the things that I will pick up after this. I think to try and make all of those changes now would be slightly complicated, because then we'd have to completely redo the political balance calculations. And whilst I love playing with the political balance spreadsheet, given that we've got the AGM coming up, there may be an opportunity to consider it at that stage instead. Certainly what I would like to see, you know, as a matter of practice, is odd numbered committees across the board. And if that means that you take a committee of 4 and you make it 5 and a committee of 10 and you make it 9, you keep the same number of places. It just means that you have a natural split on committees, which allows decision making to happen. So certainly that's something that we will be picking up as part of the Constitution Working Group, but also as part of the annual cycle of nominations for places.
Yeah, Councillor Rose.
Yeah, and we had this conversation in the Constitution Working Group last week, and we called out that exact same thing around the even number committees, and we made that recommendation that we should be fixing that as part of the constitutional review. I'm saying that to say I think we should also, as AMG, say that that is a policy that we should be trying to push into the Constitution Working Group, and regardless, it'll come back to AMG as part of the constitutional changes if we make those proposals. I think for any committee other than the urgency committee, fixing that should be done in slow time. I think that ideally this would be done in slow time if it's just fixing quorum and fixing numbers and things like that. But by the nature of urgency committee, the point of it is that it can turn around really quickly, and therefore if there's a need to address something with it, it is an urgent change that's needed. So you know, I certainly in terms of the logic of changing it to an odd number and changing quorum to still a majority, I think that is best practice entirely, and I think the wording is right, so you know, I'm fully supportive as well.
Councillor Kenny.
I'd like to ask a bit of a naive question. So can you change quorum on the committee without adding the extra member?
You could choose to do that, but then you're still left with an even numbered committee. And the challenge you then get is, if in the circumstance here, for example, where it's a 2 Labour, 2 Liberal Democrat, potentially every decision becomes a chair's casting vote, which almost devolves itself to, well, what's the point in having the committee? Just give the chair the power. Whereas at least if you've got a committee of 5, you're going to have an even odd split, and there's more scope for discussion and debate, rather than effectively just handing the chair the power at the beginning.
I guess
Yeah, that makes sense.
it is a fair point that we could do one without the other, and it could address the current crisis potentially, but the fact that we need to fix both and both help with the current challenge, I think, again, makes logical sense for both to be tackled at the same time.
Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in the Constitution Working Group, we discussed what the different options were. We agreed that we needed to change the Constitution, and we talked about the different ways of doing it, and we kind of agreed that this was the best solution. It's not ideal, and there are other options, but we kind of, I think, fairly unanimously agreed that this was the best option.
Yeah, and just to add to that, it wasn't just us on the working group
Yeah,
either, so it was unanimous with others present.
Okay, any other questions or debate wanted? Any question? Yes.
I mean, just one, I suppose, quite minor point that hasn't been mentioned yet. I fully support this. I think it means we can conduct important business of the council much more effectively. I think it also, by properly explaining the number and quorum explicitly in the Constitution, it also just makes it a more easy to understand, more accessible document for everyone who wants to read it to understand as well, rather than having to see if it is specifically mentioned anywhere, reading hundreds of pages, finding it isn't, and so it's covered by this blanket rule. Just laying it out explicitly makes it much more understandable for everyone involved, which I think is important as well. It should be a kind of publicly accessible, readable, understandable document, and I think this helps to do that as well.
I mean, in an ideal world, what would be useful in the Constitution is a table of the committees, the quorum and the numbers, which would be a very straightforward thing to do. And then it's explicitly clear for every committee and nobody has to argue about it. And that should be an easy enough thing to achieve, he says optimistically.
If only we knew who was rewriting the Constitution at the moment.
Somebody who likes spreadsheets, perhaps.
But I totally agree, and I think that's the point that we would say about the wider committees is actually the question of are there any other committees like this, should be so easy to answer. And you actually have to start really unpicking the constitution to figure out where it is. That's why this has never been addressed in the past, because it's never come up. So I think this has unearthed that challenge. We need to fix that challenge along with the other constitutional challenges. But we can tick off the one that is urgent in an urgent way, and then everything else can be done, you know, in a more proper, appropriate time frame.
I think you summed that up very well. So, so in order to remedy the situation, it's proposed that Article 11 be further amended by the introduction of the following paragraph. The committee shall comprise 5 members and shall have a quorum of 3 members. And if members are minded to endorse this addition, the matter will then be considered by council on Thursday, the 21st of March, 2024.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Just one other thing we haven't mentioned, but I think it's worth, we're all aware of it, but it's worth it for the kind of webcast, is there's an impact of this going from 4 to 5 people. It is in the annex, but do you want to?
So by all means, obviously we've had this brief conversation in advance. What this does is it slightly changes the political balance calculation, because you're increasing the number of overall seats or overall committee places from 107 to 108. Curiously, the knock-on impact of that is, whilst the allocation for this committee would make it a three Labour and 2 Liberal Democrat, the overall additional place is allocated to the Liberal Democrat. So I've had previously held discussions with the Labour group leader. She is comfortable that there is a proposed change to one of the scrutiny committees, which will then lose 1 Labour place, taking it from 6 places to 5. That place will go to the Liberal Democrats, will go from 4 places to 5. So you end up, sadly, you end up with that even numbered committee with chairs casting vote. But it's the least worst option. And that will be decided on by council tomorrow as part of this overall change, that they will agree the change to the wording of this article, and will then agree that the consequent changes to political balance will be taken, and there will be a nomination sought from the Liberal Democrats for that additional place.
Okay. So because of the nature of this committee, staffing matters and urgency, which always is made up of elected members, the fact that it's an even number at the moment, it's not been able to be held since late February, and it's an urgent committee. I think we have decided that tonight we're going to concentrate just on this particular committee, and that we will look in future at the other committees that are not, that have an even number of members, so that the core is, it puts us in this situation again. But we're going to look at that in the future. It's something that was picked up in the cross-party constitutional working group that we, some of us have been members of party to. We could change the quorum, but it's still not ideal, because then the chair would always have the casting vote. We don't particularly want to go ahead like that. It's not so very democratic. So I think this really is our best solution in the circumstances. So I think we'll put it to a vote, unless anybody's got anything else to say, because I realise it's not a very long meeting, it's not a very long topic that we're doing, but it is something that needs to be considered and voted on. So
Almost feels like I'm trying to find things to say, but I promise I'm not. The other thing we haven't mentioned, we talked about the even, we haven't talked about the small committees as well, but the risk of there being a 4 quorum for a 4 or 5 committee also needs to be part of the thing we're reviewing in the constitutional group. We did say it on the working group, but again, saying it for NG's benefit, I think it's useful.
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I think that's kind of picked up with the discussions we've had. Okay, so I'd like to vote on that. Sorry, yes. Everybody for?
Sorry.
And nobody is against, and nobody's abstaining. No. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Carried. So 4 votes. Yeah, so I would for the vote to the meeting tonight, I think, unless.
Just making sure that we're minuting that ANG is going to consider the even and the low numbers, because it's technically separate to voting on the actual item, isn't it? So,
Yeah. We will it's the urgency of this committee that's led us to have this meeting. Okay, so, yeah, I think that's everything done.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much.